I love being out on Wimbledon Common on sunny days like these when you can hear the blackbirds sing and the woodpeckers rattling in the trees. And in these days while we're struggling with coronavirus and the A3 is so quiet, you can actually hear those birds. Creativity is part of God's DNA, and when he made human beings in his image, he embedded that in us. So artistic creativity is fundamental to human experience, and that's why I'd like to talk about some art. You might think I'm going to show you great paintings by Velasquez or Raphael, but actually I'm going to talk about some graffiti. Graffiti is really personal. It expresses our desire to inscribe our presence into a certain place, to etch our private or impulsive thoughts into material reality. The Alexamenos graffito dates from the 2nd century BC. It's quite hard to read, so this black and white image helps. It was scratched into plaster on the wall of a house near the Palatine Hill in Rome, the Domus Gilotiana. It is in fact the earliest depiction of Jesus in art, and yet it does not actually portray Jesus. It's a figure on a cross with a donkey head, and to the right there's a man with his hand upraised, and a caption written in scrawly Greek says, "Alexamenos worships his God." Clearly it was a piece of scorn against an early Christian in Rome, and the house where it was found had for a time been a paedagogium, a kind of boys' boarding school. The graffitist thought Alexamenos was a fool to worship Jesus, who'd suffered the shame of a Roman crucifixion. But Alexamenos clearly understood that Jesus' death had brought him forgiveness. And so while the insult of the graffiti is still present for us to see, it's not its loudest message across the centuries. Alexamenos' name means two things: Alexo, I defend, and menos, strength, bravery. Good Friday changed the world because on that day, Jesus paid for sins once for all time. And the bravery and courage that people like Alexamenos showed meant that that message of Jesus could spread right across the world. My second graffiti dates almost 1200 years later and about 1200 miles away in northern England. The Kingdom of Northumbria was one of the first places in Anglo-Saxon England to receive Christianity. But Northumbria also faced the threat of constant war with Scotland, and that's why there are so many great medieval castles up there. A while ago, I was on holiday and found a fantastic bit of 14th century graffiti at Warkworth Castle in Northumberland, which belonged to the powerful Percy family. The graffiti is in a side tower. You have to look through one of the small windows at shoulder height, and there, in the thick tower walls, it's on a window jamb. It's a small relief carving of Jesus on the cross, and to the right a crowd of heads. Some of the heads look towards Jesus, and others seem to keep a watchful eye for the Scottish out of the window. It's not great art, but it must have been hard to carve the stone in such an awkward place. In 1319, when Edward II was king, 24 English soldiers held this castle against a fierce attack from the Scots. Perhaps it was one of the soldiers, cold, lonely, and thinking about what might happen to him before the attack, who carved this graffiti. And we also know that someone else with time on their hands made another crucifixion graffiti. They seem very private acts of faith tucked away, but the very act of making them speaks of medieval people for whom the cross of Jesus Christ meant everything to them. Our final bit of graffiti is by today's most famous street artist, Banksy, whose iconic spray paintings on buildings are known and loved. It's actually a print, and it captures the materialism of our society. Jesus is on the cross, although there is no cross there, and his hands are full of shopping bags bulging with presents. Everything is monochrome, apart from the pink bows of the gifts accentuating the kitsch superficiality of our consumer life. With our shops only open for essential needs because of COVID-19, we're beginning to rethink all this anyway. We don't need all this stuff. What we thought mattered doesn't seem to matter so much anymore. Good Friday is the defining day in all of history, because on that day, Jesus paid for sins, so that people who turn to him, trust in him, may experience his grace and goodness pouring down on them.